Mariah Scott, welcome to Confidence Conversations.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited that you are here. And before we dive into all of the amazing work that you're doing, I want to know, what does confidence mean to you?
So, for me, confidence is really just standing in your truth and owning it. I believe that when it comes to just owning our stories and acknowledging, our truth and accepting things that happened for us. I like to say things happen for us and not to us. I really just feel like that really grounds us and the work that we do. And so that's how I would define it. In addition to that, I will also define it as um, really just understanding that you can produce greatness and greatness stems from you. I think that's something extremely important. And sometimes we forget, like, hey, I can actually produce something amazing for other people that can be very impactful. And so just acknowledging that is extremely important as well.
I think that's huge. And I think that one of the gems you just dropped is really that life happened for you and not to you. And I think it takes a lot of lived experience to get there. So I want to know how you kind of came to that conclusion, because that's a whole bomb right there.
So honestly, it was more so a mindset for me, and it was a mindset shift because I feel obviously life happens, right? And one of the things that I actually started transitioning into is planning for um, life happening, right? I plan for everything else in my life except for life happening.
Right.
um, but I'm always thinking about first and foremost is what am I supposed to gain from this particular situation? And it's sometimes it's extremely hard to think in that particular perspective, especially when you're going through trauma, right? And things that are traumatic traumatic that you end up going through, that takes a lot to just heal and just acknowledge and even accept, right? But when I'm thinking about just like my personal life and my personal journey, I'm thinking about these obstacles that come in my way that I'm supposed to navigate and literally think to myself, is there something that I'm supposed to gain from this? And just from, a spiritual sense, sometimes obstacles are obstacles, and sometimes obstacles end up being opportunities as well. And so understanding the difference and understanding how to navigate that once you do understand the difference.
So tell me about how you actually did that in your own life, and what's your journey to cultivating confidence?
Cultivating confidence. So for me, I was, being all transparent, right? I like to be very honest and transparent. Growing up, I performed confidence.
Mhm.
So, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that, and also what that actually looked like. So I didn't really understand how to embody confidence. I understood obviously like, hey, this is something that you're supposed to believe. You're supposed to believe in yourself. So you're supposed to acknowledge that you can achieve X, Y, and Z, right? But for me, it didn't set in that I actually believed it. For a very long time, I was just performing it based off of what I saw people who were confident do, right? So there were walks that I like, I didn't even know it subconsciously. I was just like, oh, I
Mhm.
know how to do that walk, and I was just walking tall and things, my shoulders were back, but I didn't really know what that actually meant. I was just performing. Same thing with, conversations, right? Sometimes it ended up being a performance. I didn't necessarily believe everything that was coming out of my mouth. I was just stating it. So I remember, for an example, I was a part of this girls group. It was a girls empowerment group. Absolutely loved it. And we had to do an assignment about confidence, confidence and self-love coupled together. And one of the questions that they asked was, what is something that you feel like you're not as confident in? And literally, I was like, I'm confident in everything. How I look, da, da, da. I was naming everything. I was like, how I look, what I say, what I believe, like I'm just confident, right? And it was my sister who was like, but when you're by yourself, I noticed that you know, feel this way about certain aspects of your physical appearance. When you're by yourself, you know, I've learned, and I watch you and I observe you, you know, feel this certain way about, you know, new obstacles that you have to overcome, new benchmarks that you're trying to achieve, and you're not as confident, right? And I had to sit with that because I was like, oh wait, hold on, who am I behind closed doors, right?
Yeah.
And so I had to really just understand, okay, I need to start transitioning and starting to actually believe everything that I say. It's not just enough to perform, but it's also an aspect of actually believing it. So what did that look like? To be honest, it was a process, because I had to learn how to accept things that I was not okay with myself. And certain things I just can't change. Certain physical stuff I really can't change. My body image being one of them. And so I had to accept that for myself. And that's actually something that is brought up in the show, that is an allude to the crown she wears. It's an allude to something that happened to me personally when I was approached with my mom and my sister in a grocery store, and a person felt the need to address my mother and accuse of her of being a bad parent because we were anorexic, and we weren't anorexic. I was like, we eat a lot, but it doesn't, you know, it doesn't show on the outside. And so that was something that I became insecure about, because I had to accept that this is just my body. And for a very long time, I remember in college, I asked every one of my friends, how can I gain weight? They told me everything from eating peanut butter before you go to bed to ice cream. All these things are not healthy, right? But
Yeah.
but this is what I was going through. And I felt growing up, I didn't have a space to talk about it, because when I did bring it up, I was ridiculed, right? I was told like, oh, you're perfect. Everybody wants to be you. Everybody wants to be like you. So I didn't find a space.
And while that's uplifting, right, it's also like, wait, but I'm not feeling that, and I need a place to talk about it. And I think sometimes we need that opportunity to share our stories and our lived experience, regardless of like whatever motivation or inspiration you want to throw on me. That's great, and I appreciate it. But right now, I just need to be heard. Right. And it's crazy. You mentioned like trying to change your body, which you look amazing, but like trying to change your body based on other people's expectations of you, or other people's expectations of what health looks like, or whatever that is. And really, there's no one physical representation of that. There's just physical assumptions, the assumptions that we project out onto people. And I think the other part of what you said that was so powerful to me is that you projected or performed confidence, but weren't really confident, and had to take a moment to sit back and think about that. And I'll tell you, that's actually one of the reasons why I call this confidence conversations. Is I was at dinner with two girlfriends, and one of them was like, when is the last time you didn't feel confident? And I'm like, I can't remember. Like, I feel good, I look good, whatever. And I went home later that night and was like, if you truly believed all of those things, which I did believe, that I felt good, looked good, whatever, but that's not the core of confidence.
Right.
Confidence is having faith or trust in something. And I found myself on the end of a really bad situation, and I had to think about that, of being like, if I had trusted myself, had faith in myself, and were confident in my own abilities, I wouldn't have been in that situation. And so I think it's really powerful for us as women to kind of reflect on that, because we can be knocking out of the park in one area of life, but have some internal work to do in others. So I appreciate you for that.
Of course, of course.
So I know that a lot of your work includes helping people navigate their own journeys, their own social, emotional journeys. So what does that look like?
So that's a very interesting question. I always lead with acknowledging that everyone's journey is different, and there is no cookie cutter approach to your own social emotional journey, right? I feel like sometimes we just want a blueprint. We're like, hey, give it to me straight. Give me the 5 steps to healing. And I'm just like, it doesn't work that way, because something that works for me might not work for you and might not be comfortable for you. And so really acknowledging that, like, hey, this is something that you could possibly practice, but just know it may or may not work for you, but then you understand yourself better. And so when it comes to social emotional journeys, especially when it relates to relationships, there's a couple of things that I'm always encouraging others to be mindful of. The first thing, and this is something that you were mentioning earlier, is really just one, acknowledging where you are, which is a whole lot harder to do than said, right? But really acknowledging where you are in your own personal journey. So what that could look like, really just understanding how you identify your own needs in relationships. What role do you specifically play in those particular relationships? And because of that role, what are some things that you're okay with and what are some things that you're not okay with? So this idea of boundary setting. But one of the things I also include in the conversation is, what is your role with yourself? Which is a whole nother conversation, right?
Question.
What role do you play with within yourself, right? And so, like, if I'm to really kind of sit down and think about it for myself, right now, where I am in my season, in my season of growth, I would literally call myself, like, if I were to put a name to it, a name to the role, I would definitely call myself, like, the truth, right? I'm going to give you the truth of where you are and what you're doing and what's not going to work, right? And that has to do with my boundary setting, my capacity. People have been asking me to do things and to show up to spaces, and I'm like, okay, the truth is about to speak to you, right? You can't go. And here's why, right? And so it's like that conversation is like, okay, this is the role. But when I was younger, the role that I was playing was the giver. The role that I played was the sacrificial person. So like, this was the role that I was playing with myself. And where I was in that season, I had to understand the effects and the impacts of that role with myself. And I had to take a step back and acknowledge, okay, is that something that is healthy? Or is that something that is an unhealthy practice? And for a very long time, I couldn't distinguish what was healthy and unhealthy practice, because I just assumed this is how it worked. And so I was like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. We'll get into later where that came from. But it's like, this is what I was supposed to do, right? This is the role that I'm supposed to play. And so because of it, I took a backseat and I took on this, okay, we got this, put on your armor today and you got it, right? You're ready for battle. And it just became a problem. So
to your point though, it's so important to realize that, like, the role that we play in one season, whether it's healthy or not, because something can be completely healthy in one season and turn toxic in another, or maybe it just is something that no longer serves you, or maybe you're in a place of evolution. We cannot define ourselves by these labels. We can have, I like how you put it, what is the role that I am playing in my life right now, the present moment, not how have I defined myself in the past, or better yet, because this is how a lot of people define themselves, is what do other people see me as? Because a lot of times we don't even define ourselves by how we see ourselves. We define ourselves by how other people see us. So if other people think we're smart, then I'm the smart girl. Or if other people think that I'm not going to amount to anything, well, I'm not good for nothing, I shouldn't do this. What role am I playing in my life right now? I love that. And speaking of that, one of the roles that you're playing, okay, is in your own one woman show, The Crown She Wears. So tell me about the project and how it came to life.
Yeah, so The Crown She Wears, we like to call it an experience. We don't like to reduce it down to a play, because it is an experience from beginning to end. And so the experiential portion of it is to encourage communities to practice social emotional wellness. And so within the show, you see a practical inside look on how these roles can play out on the day-to-day basis. So the role you have with yourself, the role you have with your partner, the role you have with your family members, what does it look like when it comes to social emotional wellness and all these different roles, or the lack thereof? And so it's just a practical way of looking at it. As far as where it came from, so it has been a project that I've been working on for the last 3 years. And it really deprived from my own journey, and also, communities that I confided with, specifically women of color, who talked about this idea of having to show up to spaces fully armed and always thinking about someone else, right? And someone else's safety, comfort, all of that jazz. And in conversation, I realized that we're all similarly having this, we all have similar situations happening where we're trying to figure out, okay, I know I'm strong. I know I can handle these situations and things of that nature, but how am I providing a healthy balance between being there for others, showing up for others, yada, 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 and then also showing up for myself. And so I wanted to write a piece to empower communities to actually acknowledge their own power and decision making when it comes to owning that part of themselves, and saying like, hey, I have the ability to say no and not apologize, and don't have to apologize for it or feel sorry about it. I have the ability to say no and not feel like I'm, a guilt trip. I have the ability to just even acknowledge and find the language to say, this in this particular relationship where I am in my life, this isn't going to work for me. This type of communication style is not going to work for me. Let's work together to figure out something that's going to be, more positive for the both of us, or more progressive for the both of us, because I value this relationship. So how can we start having that conversation and starting to bring that language to the table? And so really just acknowledging that. But honestly, it just comes from my own life. I was the one who I didn't know. You can ask any of my close friends. They will tell you, oh, Mariah, she finally started to say no. Because in college, I was the yes person, and it brought so many great opportunities, right? And I was always saying, you need me to show up here? Yes, of course. You need me to do this? Yes, of course. Come over to my apartment. We're going to have, community dinners. Like, that's who I was. And that's who I was for so long. And one of the things that I had to realize, that even in the capacity that I'm operating right now with the crown she wears, there's a version of myself that I have to grow towards that is not going to, look like the other version. And that's okay. Even when people are coming to me and saying, well, this version doesn't benefit me. Okay, that's fine. But this version is going to benefit so many other people because I'm standing in my purpose. And this is where I'm supposed to be headed, right? And so we can have that conversation. If you feel I'm not benefiting you, I can benefit you in this particular way right now. But right now, I have to stand in my purpose, and I have to understand what is no longer my assignment. And that right there is not my assignment.
And you understand the assignment. I see.
Exactly.
Very clearly. So that is a lot easier said than done, though. And, one of the things you mentioned, boundaries, like we set boundaries, and I'm not going to stand for this, and I'm going to stick up for myself, whatever. And sometimes we even get to the point of communicating our boundaries, which is powerful, but upholding boundaries is a whole different story. Yeah. So what advice can you give in that area? And like, what can people expect to learn to that end with the crown she wears?
Yeah, so one of the things when it comes to boundaries, and this is something that I always give a disclaimer, this is something that I have done that has worked for me, and I can totally encourage you to do it. If it doesn't work, totally fine. But you tried it. There's a couple of things. The first thing was I realized from my own experience that I was putting myself in positions that cause certain outcomes to occur. And so for an example, I didn't even know what a boundary was within myself, right? I didn't know what that even looks like. And it sounds weird when you hear it. It's like, a boundary with yourself. What does that even mean, right? But a part of my yes was I did not shut off. the reason why I was saying yes all the time is because I didn't shut down ever. Like it was just a continuous, I was working from 8 a.m. sometimes to like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, right? So part of my boundary within myself was, guess what? That email can wait. You're no longer working till 10 o'clock at night. You're shutting off because every time you see an email, you say yes to something. And sometimes it's a yes that you need to do like right then and there. Absolutely not. You think that it needs to be done right then and there, even though they literally said, oh, have this done by the end of the week. My mind was like, well, I can just get it done right now because I'm already on it. I'm already working, right? And so it was like, hey, turn your emails off. You're done at 7 o'clock at night. You're done at 6 o'clock, right? Nothing is happening after that. Turn your notifications off. Your emails no longer have notification towards you. Your IG doesn't have notifications. Your Facebook, none of that. Nobody can have access to you, because once people think they have 24/7 access to you, that's the problem.
It's a real problem. And, you know, it's important to take a step back and say that if you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to another thing. So if you're saying yes, yes, yes to all these people, you're saying no, no, no to yourself in some way, shape, or form. No to my own relaxation, no to my own space, no to being able to cultivate my life in the way that I would like for it to be. Yes, we have responsibilities and obligations that we have to tend to, but no, those shouldn't exist all the time. And the thing that I think I always reflect back to is who we are, right? We are human beings, not human doings. And it's okay to take a breath. You are defined by who you are at your essence, not all of the stuff that you do. And if we define ourselves by the things that we do, if we're ever put into a situation where, say, we lose the ability to do, act, or perform, whether it's the loss of a job or a position in someone's life, whatever that is, if you lose that and that's tied to your identity, you lose who you are. Yeah. So taking time to foster that and cultivate that, I think, is really important.
One thing I like to say, and piggyback off what you're saying, one thing that I like to say is knowing when we're attaching our value to what we can produce. I think such point, right? Because we're always in this like production mode. We're always thinking like, am I being productive today? Am I getting things done today? Right. And that creates this little hamster wheel that we're just finding ourselves in. And so, like you were saying, there has to be that separation. I am valuable because I am valuable, not because I achieved X, Y, and Z on my resume. Those are just an addition, right? That's just like, you know, because I'm valuable, that's what I was able to produce as fruit, right? And so acknowledging that me, the vessel, is valuable, and because of who I am, I'm able to produce fruit in other people's lives. And you want to be able to produce fruit. The last thing you want is to bring in, you know, all types of energy, negative energies and toxics, and I ain't got time for that. But it's like, but in order for me to produce fruit the way I was designed to, I have to take care of self. And the biggest thing I do is rest is a part of my mantra. When people are like, self-care, I'm like, rest.
Because we think self-care is like massages and getting our nails done, which it is, it's nice, right. But self-care can just be like going to sleep. Self-care can be turning off your notifications. Self-care can be taking a walk down the street when usually you sit at your desk all day, eat lunch in front of the computer. Like self-care is way bigger than some of the small stuff that we do. But I want to talk about, you know, you talk about, you know, cultivating seeds in other people. How can us as women, specifically Black women, do a better job of supporting each other?
There is a couple of things. The biggest thing that I'm about right now, and this is something that I'm pushing, I'm actually actively putting together a resource kit. Being trained in certain conversations and languages is extremely important. I feel like right now, we want to be a resource. We want to be a support system. I remember, you know, having conversations where I'll call folks up, you know, people that, you know, I trust and confide in. And the first thing I'll say is like, yeah, you know, I'm having a moment right now. And the response is, okay, you're good. You got this. You're strong. And I'm like, okay, I understand the strength that's in me, but right now, that's not what I need. Right.
Yeah, right now I can't feel it. I can't access that strength. Like I need you.
Exactly. And so I think when it comes to, you know, those type of conversations, you know, sometimes it does need a little bit of training and a little bit of learning on our end to be like, how can I make sure that I'm actually helping someone and not hurting them in the process, right? If I want to be this safe space, if I want to be this support system, what does that look like? Also knowing the capacity that you can assist and support, because certain conversations, I know I'm not like, I haven't even started my healing journey to say, I can be a safe haven for you right now to have this conversation, because I'm just not in the space to do that. And I might end up saying something that's going to trigger you, that's going to traumatize you. And I don't want to be that for you. And have that real conversation, right? That's part, some language that you can use. I know sometimes we struggle with language because we're like, I really don't know what to say. And that's okay too. Sometimes you could just say, I'm here as a support system. I honestly don't know what to say, but if you can just help me on what you need right now, if you just need me to listen, I can just listen, right? Sometimes we're always offering advice, and some people don't even need advice. They just need you to listen and to know that you're just there for them. And I think that's important too. Sometimes our silence is actually, you know, a support as well. So just having that conversation. Another thing too, when it comes to even fostering spaces, how are we acknowledging that these spaces are inclusive? One of the things that I've realized going into spaces is we tend to create spaces like education. You and your teacher will create a space, and then they'll expect that student to navigate within that space based off of their ideas, their rules, what they deem as comfort and safety, right? And they don't have students' input, right? This is not everyone, but these spaces do occur. Same thing when it comes to just supporting women. It's like, we're creating these spaces with women in mind, but do women have a say so in what safety and comfort looks like in these spaces, or are we expecting them to operate in them? And they're like, but is it exclusive, an inclusive space? And I'm like,
Right.
is it though?
Yeah, and that word means different things to everybody. And I think two things are at the core of what you just said. First is self-awareness, to be able to know where you are in your journey and how you can help and how you can give, because you may be able to help, but may not be in a position to pour anything from your cup because you don't have anything left. And then two is just the innate human desire, even need to be heard, and not in this like showy look at me kind of way, but to be understood and I feel like you are a valuable part of the greater whole. And I think that the way that you expressed how we can pour into each other really embodies that, so thank you. So you are an artist extraordinaire in so many ways, from being a poet to crafting your own experience and all of the other work that you do as a coach. But you come from a family that is very sort of corporate and white collar, and you kind of broke the mold of that in some ways. So I want to know, what was it like to venture off and do something different, do something creative?
Yeah, so you know, between extended family and just like my immediate family, educators, business people, accountants, tech folks are just like really big. And one of the things for me was I always had this passion that I didn't even know it actually was brought to my attention. My teacher, I love teachers. My teacher acknowledged it. And at the time, you know, when you're that young, I think I was like 5 or 6 at the time, somebody's like, you're great at writing. You're like, oh, right? This literally was my response, like, oh, okay. And I was just like, I don't know what to respond to that. I was great that you loved my book. But as I got older, writing became, you know, a form of expression for me. And it was something that, you know, in its core, at the time when I first started writing, it wasn't tied to like having to help people, right? It was just my form of expression. It wasn't something that was, you know, like, hey, you got to use this as a form of, you know, letting your voice be heard and giving voice to the voiceless. Like, it wasn't that. It was just a form of expression for me. And so that was something, because of because of the way that I was operating in it at that time, it just became something that I was passionate about. And I'm grateful to have a supportive family. And I think they might have thought I was going to outgrow it, because I think at like fourth grade, I was like, I want to be a writer. Every time, everyone, I want to be a writer. And
Right.
I'm like, sure, they were like, oh, okay, this is just a phase, right? But yeah, so they would buy me notebooks, they'll buy me books to read. You know, my friends, close friends who knew I wanted to be a writer, they'll give me specific resources in order to grow in my writing, which was amazing. And then I, you know, went into college and I said, I want to be a writer. And they're like, oh, okay, this
Right.
is right. But the issue for me was, and this was something that actually I didn't really stand in this and actually move in a career right away. So I started off as a journalism major, realized I don't like journalism because it's nowhere near creative writing for me, at least. And so I transitioned into communications and then said, well, let's learn the business of what I'm trying to do. So I went into arts administration in my grad school. And for the longest time, I was like, well, I'll just go into education because it was comfort for me because I was an educator, right? So I was like, oh, I'm just going into education, but I want to do the business side of education, right? I want to do more programmatic work and curriculum development and really just changing things on the grounds, right? I was a mini activist. And so, and I don't want to say mini activist. I was an activist. And so one of the things that, right, I was like, that didn't came off right. But one of the things that I realized, I was always drawn back to the arts. Everything that I did, I was an assistant director at one point, and I was still doing something with the arts. And I was like, okay, I can't get rid of this feeling. I can't get rid of this pull. But I was still like, okay, well, I'll just go and be director and this, that, and a third. And it came to a point in 2019 where I literally just sat with myself and I said, I did everything that I put on that list, and I am not satisfied or fulfilled. I would rather take a chance on myself than sit here and do something that will probably not make me happy. It's something I'm passionate about, but it's not something that's really kind of like fully driving me at this point. Like I just got to a point where my mind just shifted. And so for me, that was really the goal. And literally in the first year, I got an opportunity to perform for NBA G League halftime show. I was being featured all over New York. I got so many opportunities to be on so many different platforms. And I was sitting here like, I'm good at this. And not only am I good at this, people are coming up to me and they're thanking me for the work that I'm putting out because it's so impactful and it's getting them to think and it's getting them to reflect. Right? I just can't sit on it. Like it's when you know you have that gift and it's there to be impactful and it's there to plant that seed, you just can't sit on it. There's no, like, absolutely not. And I was like, I would rather take the chance and say, I tried and it may or may have not panned out versus saying, I have never even tried and I can't even see what would have happened if I did try. And that's something that really just fueled my fire. So.
And kudos to you for doing it and for trying. One of my favorite quotes ever is from Caroline Myss, and she says, suffering happens when we pursue a life or chase a dream that doesn't belong to us. And so often we do that because we have this societal view of what it means to be successful or what it means to make an impact. And the truth is, we can do that in so many different ways, but it starts with identifying who it is that you are in that form of expression. And so it's not the paycheck, it's not whatever that equates to success. It's choosing passion, living in your purpose, and then all the rest really does follow. And like, I love to iterate and reiterate that because I was on a similar path, but in the medical field, right? Sort of working up the ranks, thinking I was going to do all of these things and was so unfulfilled, despite the fact that I was really good at what I was doing. And so taking a step back to realize like, I can walk in purpose and still live the life, like the lifestyle that I want to live. That's, I think, really powerful, and people need to hear more about that. So we talk about success and how it's not necessarily tied to titles and labels, but what is success to you?
So to me, success is progression. And the simplest of forms. One of the things that I am very intimate about sharing with others is the goal isn't, the success doesn't come from the goal. The success comes from the process, right? And sometimes we're so we're so framed to think that the goal is that makes us successful, right? But it's like, no, what are you learning? Who are you becoming from going through this, right? And sometimes who are becoming is somebody we're not, too keen with. You're like, hey, let's pull back and let's kind of switch this up. And sometimes who we're becoming, we're just like, this is going to work for me, especially for what I'm aligned to do in the career, even in like the personal and professional work that I'm doing. And so I think it's really important for us to just acknowledge that and to reframe that. One of the things, even with working with students for so long, I always tell them, I was like, define success for yourself. I understand you have parental influence. Oh, they have so much parental influence. I understand that. I understand that, you have societal influence, but at the end of the day, it's what's going to really drive you, because this is your life. This is who you want to be. And everybody else, they're always going to have expectations for you. That's not going to change. Depending on their role in your life, they're always going to have an expectation for you. They're always going to think you may or may not be living up to your potential. Are you satisfied with what you're doing? Are you satisfied with where you are? And if you're not, let's start shifting that, but progressing every single day, knowing, like, even if it's just a little bit, right? I know for me, I had to redefine productivity for myself. I had to literally say, I might not get to everything on my to-do list, but if I get to one or two things, that's okay. Or if I make progress in one of those two things, that's okay too, right? And
That's
so
not perfection.
Exactly.
So you've done a lot of things, made a lot of progress already. And I'm sure only more is to come. But sometimes, and we've talked about this before, it can be hard to accept greatness in our lives. And sometimes the bigger our goals are, the more intimidating they can be, even if we know that we have what it takes to get them done, to see our dreams to fruition. So does this resonate with you and your journey, and how?
This resonates with me every single day. Because I'm the type of person who likes to challenge myself, right? And I like to challenge myself and step outside of my comfort zone, because I personally believe that's where my true growth happens. And so just with the crown she wears, for example, I didn't have a blueprint. I had references, but I didn't have a blueprint fully to what I actually designed this show to be, right? From not just the production standpoint, but from, the talk back, and then making sure that we have these mental and social emotional health resources, and how are we facilitating conversation in the talk back. That has to be intentional, right? And so for me, coming at this pretty much kind of blind, I had self-doubt, and I was literally thinking to myself, okay, I know you said this. Like, I literally made a public announcement, and whenever I publicly announce things to the best of my ability, I try to get them done. So I already felt like I had to hold myself accountable, because you just stood in front of like a room full of 100 people, and people talk. So even if you're like, oh, this is exclusive, nobody knows about this, people gonna talk. So I was like, oh, okay. So you got to do something about it. And so when I decided to take it on tour, one, I've never toured before. I've done events, I set them up, and they've been successful, but to consistently do events one after the other and keep a team motivated and this, that, and third. Like, I was my own tour manager, and then I, do put the events together, and then I run the show, and then I do the show. You know what I mean? Like, it's a lot. And so, for me, one of the things that I had to do was really kind of take a step back. And we've been talking, I feel like the theme of here is like reflection. But one of the things that I had to do was really kind of take a step back. And the first thing I did was breathe. because I can be my worst critic. And I can be very hard on myself. And I will tell anyone I am a perfectionist. I am. And there are moments where it's great. And there are moments where I'm like, okay, you have to practice grace now, because that, like, today didn't go so well. That's totally fine. Tomorrow's a new day. And I think that was the biggest lesson for me. One of the biggest lessons is, what does actual grace look like? I feel like we always put this word out, right? But how does that actually show up in my own life? At this particular point, sometimes it was apologizing to myself.
Yeah.
Mariah, I am so sorry that I done put you under that much pressure, knowing that you tour manager and star and writer and producer. Like, I am so sorry.
It's like the one woman cast. It's more than a one woman show. Like, really clear. This is a one woman production.
Right. And so it's like, hold on. Like, you can say sorry to yourself. And I literally, like, I started writing this. I started writing a love letter to myself, but it's transformed into, like, sometimes it was a section of it that was just an apology. Yeah. It's like, I am so sorry that I put you through the ringer, because you've been through enough where people just had these expectations that you've been trying to live at. And the one thing that you've been trying to do within yourself is just call yourself enough and to remind yourself that you're enough, despite everybody else telling you what you should do with your life. And now I'm doing it to you, right? Like, that was a moment for me. I was like, I can't be like everyone else. Like, my relationship with myself is that much, that valuable to me, that I can't be the one who is basically coming for you. I can't be the one that's taking you down. I have to be the one that's uplifting you. So now I transition to, whenever I have these moments where I'm like, oh, we didn't do that, and oh, this wasn't it, and da, da, da. I'm like, oh, wait, nope. Let me say something positive to you. Guess what? You have a team, yes. But guess what? They follow you, and you put an entire tour together.
Right.
You've been out here changing, right? I was like, you're out here changing lives. Do you read those surveys? Let me go back to these surveys, right? Someone literally said that they scheduled more self-care days because this show resonated that much with them. They bought themselves gifts because this show resonated with them. This is literally in the survey, sis. You want to look it up? Like,
survey says.
Right. It's like, we're not making this up. And so I literally, like, I had to be like, okay. And I'm probably going to be apologizing to myself. I know I am. I know it's going to happen because I'm growing. I'm getting better at it. But at the end of the day, I'm like, I'm not about to be the one talking down about myself. That's not what we're about to do. And it's harder to do it because we just sometimes you slip into it.
It's a journey and it's a process, and we're never going to be perfect at it. You know, you're never going to completely master, like, those thoughts creep in, right? But to be able to identify them and then separate them from yourself, like, we are not our thoughts. The very fact that we can think them shows that we're separate from them. You don't have to identify or resonate with that negative thing. And furthermore, you can go, now that you've identified that, and speak life into yourself and light your own path rather than this negativity. Because when we're thinking about our futures, and we've talked about, like, what does success mean? If we're going to get there and if we're going to be successful, we have to attract and align with the energy of success. And we don't do that by being negative. So as soon as you think it, switch it up. Let's be intentional about the way that we use words. And speaking of words, any final words of wisdom you have for us?
Oh, final words. So I would say this, because this is something that has gotten me through a lot. So 2 things. The first thing is accepting your journey. I feel like obviously we go through our journeys, right? But a form of that to me is just accepting your journey, accepting and understanding, and just really trying to figure out what is this journey, trying to tell me. What are these things trying to tell me? I think that's extremely important. Another thing that has just been my go-to is just getting to a point where you're so, okay, let me rephrase this. Let me think about okay, I got it. Another thing for me that has just really set with me throughout my personal journey is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned throughout this entire journey. And I know, again, we've been preaching to y'all, I'm sorry, it's easier said than done. Because right now I am operating outside of my comfort zone. For those who know, I'm an introvert, and sometimes it's hard to navigate spaces where everyone is kind of in your space and want to speak to you and this, that, and third. But one of the things that I've been learning throughout this particular process is learning how to navigate those spaces in a way that really kind of safeguards me, but also allows me to continue to do what I do and continue to do what I love. And then the last thing is, try it. Whatever it is, try it. And if you tried it a different way. But try it. I feel like sometimes we will be the ones who hold ourselves back. And I know we have a project coming out, and I'm literally going to give you the ins and outs of my time and talk about me being the one that was holding me back because I was so fearful of just starting.
Yeah. They say, like, it's not how you start, it's how you finish, but in order to finish, you have to start. And so that is really the most important part of the journey. And the only thing I'd add to what you said is, when you plant a seed, you don't see it grow right away. It takes some time, the roots have to go deep, and then you see something blossom above the surface. So just because you're cultivating your dream or your life or what have you, and you don't see the fruits of that labor yet, doesn't mean that nothing is happening. So keep going, keep trying, keep at it, because you'll get there.
Yes. And sometimes you're supposed to hand it over too. You're not always supposed to see it bloom to its fullest. You're supposed to hand it over. Somebody's going to come into your life, supposed to hand it over, give them the keys, and they'll see it bloom. And so that's important too. No one hand it over like, not it no more. Sometimes you are just a seed planter.
Right.
And that's okay.
Well, this has been amazing. How do people get in touch with you? Where do we follow you? Give us all the details.
Yes. So you can definitely, if you would like to get a monthly newsletter on all things the crown she wears and any updates about me and my performance and projects that I have coming up, we have a website. So if you go to www.mariah, MARIH, the letter N as in Nancy, SCOTT.com, and you actually subscribe, you'll get a monthly newsletter with all the information of upcoming projects. So that's fun. If you're more traditional, it's like, I just want to follow you, that's totally fine as well. On Instagram, you can follow me as Mariah and Scott, the same spelling. And then on Facebook, it's just Mariah Scott. And so those are the platforms that I'm on as of right now. But definitely newsletter. I strongly encourage newsletter because you get the tea, and then you also get the exclusives. So.
Okay, well, we love an exclusive. So over to mariahandscott.com. And Mariah, thank you so much for being a part of this confidence conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Talk soon.
Yes.